You sit in a barber's chair long enough, and you'll hear things people don't even tell their therapist. I've been shaving faces and cutting hair for over 20 years, and let me tell you, some of the rawest, realest stories don't come from books or movies. They come from people like you and me, ordinary folks living extraordinary lives, quietly. A few months ago, a woman walked into my shop, middle-aged, calm, eyes like she'd seen too much and said too little. While I worked the razor down her neck, she told me a story that I still think about late at night. A story about silence, betrayal, and revenge served colder than any straight razor I've ever held. With her permission, and with all names changed, I'm sharing that story with you today. The woman in this story, her name's Denise. For 15 years, she mopped the marble floors of a skyscraper owned by men who didn't even bother to learn her name. They laughed, ignored her, treated her like part of the furniture. But what they didn't know was this: Denise wasn't just the janitor. She was the owner's widow and the silent majority shareholder of the company, and she'd been watching and waiting. So sit back, because what happened next flipped the boardroom upside down, and it all started with a mop bucket and a memory. 15 years, over 5,400 days. That was how long Denise Jenkins, or Miss Denise as the staff casually called her, had pushed her cleaning cart through the cold hallways of Cresswell Holdings. 15 years picking up other people's trash, wiping away careless fingerprints, and listening. Listening to conversations people thought weren't worth whispering, because what would the cleaning lady know? Wexler, his voice dripping with condescension, on the phone. Listen, just cut the benefit costs for the low-level employees. They'll complain a bit, then they'll get over it. We need good numbers this quarter, understand? They didn't know. No one in this skyscraper, from the newest interns to the powerful vice presidents, knew the explosive secret Denise Jenkins had silently kept for a decade and a half. They didn't know that the woman in the faded uniform, the one they treated like a piece of office furniture, was the majority shareholder of Cresswell Holdings, a legacy from her late husband, Roland Jenkins, the company co-founder who had been betrayed by his own partner, Curtis Banning, and whose wife and child were forced out of the business they had built together. But silence did not mean submission. Humility did not equal weakness. During those 15 years, Denise didn't just clean floors. She watched. She took notes. She gathered evidence of the corruption, the injustice, the rot slowly eating the company from within, under the management of Thomas Wexler, the man Curtis Banning had installed. Every lie, every wrongdoing, every mistreated employee, all recorded in her small black book, waiting for the day of reckoning. And that day had finally come. This morning, as Denise pushed her cart through the executive offices, the old phone in her pocket buzzed softly. A single text message from the lawyer she had been secretly working with for years. "We're ready when you are." What happens when the janitor you've ignored for 15 years suddenly walks into the boardroom and declares herself the true owner? When all the dirty secrets are exposed? And when the powerful CEO's chair suddenly becomes shakier than ever? Brace yourselves, because Thomas Wexler and the entire leadership of Cresswell Holdings are about to face a fury that has simmered for a decade and a half, and they'll never know what hit them. The text from Elliot Miles, the discreet and sharp lawyer, was the starting signal for a plan meticulously nurtured and calculated for 15 years. Denise Jenkins did not hesitate. She took off her worn-out apron, her rubber gloves, and the name Miss Denise that people had so carelessly and disrespectfully called her. The next morning, Cresswell Holdings operated as usual, at least on the surface, but there was a small difference few noticed. Denise Jenkins didn't arrive early with her creaking cart. Instead, at 9:55 a.m., she walked through the main entrance, not in her faded burgundy uniform, but in an elegant navy blue wool coat, a white blouse underneath, and low but sturdy heels that hadn't touched a mop in months. Her short, curly hair was pulled back neatly, revealing an intelligent forehead and resolute eyes. She walked past the reception desk, not even glancing at her old cleaning cart parked in a discreet corner. She didn't greet Tasha at the reception desk with her usual nod, but walked straight to the executive elevator for the 8th floor. A few employees passing by looked at her in surprise. trying to recognize the familiar woman in a completely unfamiliar guise. Denise stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the 8th floor. Inside, she watched her reflection in the polished metal wall. No longer Miss Denise the cleaner. Today, she was Denise Jenkins, co-owner, wife, mother, and the one about to reclaim justice. The Cresswell Holdings boardroom had 12 plush leather chairs, a ridiculous crystal chandelier, and a $14,000 custom-made walnut conference table from Seattle, the same table Thomas Wexler often boasted about, as if its value meant anything to the cleaners who had to scrape gum from under it every day. At precisely 10 a.m., the quarterly review meeting began. Thomas Wexler stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, tie loosened, with an air of self-importance as if he owned the very air in the room. To his left was Meredith Chandler, executive vice president, who always echoed Wexler's every whim. Beside her, Curtis Banning, the original co-founder, the only one in the room who should have known what was coming, but he had no idea. 5 minutes later, Denise Jenkins walked in, silent as a held breath. No mop, no gloves, just a navy blue coat and a file in her hand. Wexler frowned, annoyed. "Excuse me, we're in a meeting. Maintenance is supposed to come after hours." Denise didn't blink. "I'm not here for maintenance, Mr. mused Wexler. The mood in the room shifted. Meredith Chandler narrowed her eyes at her. "Excuse me, do you have an appointment?" "I do," Denise said, slowly walking to the other end of the conference table where an empty chair sat. "And I believe the shareholders were duly notified of this meeting." That's when Elliot Miles walked in behind her, briefcase in hand, his expression as calm as ever. "Good morning," he said. "My name is Elliot Miles, legal counsel to Mrs. Denise Jenkins, majority shareholder of Cresswell Holdings." Silence filled the room. Wexler's mouth fell open, but no words came out. Denise placed the file on the table and opened it. Inside were partnership agreements signed in 1998, updated ownership documents, and a notarized letter transferring all voting rights to her upon Roland Jenkins's death. Curtis Banning shifted in his seat, his face draining of color, as if someone had just pulled the rug out from under him. "No," he muttered. That can't be right." Denise turned to Curtis, her gaze as sharp as a knife. "You remember those contracts, don't you, Curtis? You helped draft them yourself." Curtis was speechless, his face pale. Denise took a step forward, her voice calm and steady, but every word carried immense weight. "For 15 years, I've watched this place become unrecognizable, watched you line your own pockets with exorbitant bonuses, ignore workplace safety violations, and punish employees just for daring to ask for basic decency." She looked directly at Wexler. "And I watched you turn my husband's company into a playground for your ego." Wexler forced a laugh. This is just a misunderstanding. I don't know what kind of scam this is." "This is not a scam, Mr. Wexler," Elliot Miles interjected, his tone professional. "All documents have been verified, and as of this moment, Mrs. Jenkins is calling for a vote of no confidence in the current CEO. She has every right to do so under the original shareholder agreement." Wexler shot up from his seat, his hands slamming onto the table, his body trembling with rage. You don't know what you're doing." Denise slowly walked around the table, looking each person in the eye. 15 years, she repeated. "All of you looked right through me as if I didn't exist. You let the employees suffer. You let this company rot from the inside. I gave you every opportunity to show a shred of humanity." She stopped right at Wexler's chair. "And you failed." Wexler's face flushed crimson. "You think you can just walk in here and take over?" She leaned in close, her voice a whisper, yet loud enough for the entire room to hear. "I am this company." Elliot Miles, unfazed by Thomas Wexler's menacing expression, placed a small stack of letters before each board member present. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice clear and firm, "these are official letters signed by Mrs. Denise Jenkins, shareholder of 65% of Cresswell Holdings, declaring a complete loss of confidence in the current chief executive officer, Mr. Thomas Wexler, and demanding an immediate vote for his removal in accordance with the terms of the company's original shareholder agreement." Wexler nearly shouted, "A vote? You don't have the right. This is my company. I built it." "You built it on the deceit and betrayal of my husband's legacy, Mr. Wexler. Denise interrupted, her voice cold but devoid of personal hatred, only stark truth. And you've run it with arrogance and greed, trampling on the very people whose sweat and effort keep it operational. Curtis Banning, the original co-founder, was now ashen-faced. He stammered, "Denise, I didn't know. I didn't think." "You didn't think, Curtis, or did you choose not to think?" Denise turned to him, her eyes no longer those of Miss Denise the cleaner, but of a true owner, one who had seen it all. "You stood by and watched Wexler turn this company into a rotten place, and you did nothing. Your silence was also complicity." Curtis lowered his head, unable to look at anyone. Meredith Chandler, the executive vice president, who had always sided with Wexler, also began to feel her own seat grow unsteady. She glanced at the other board members, searching for support, but only received confused or averted gazes. "The vote will proceed," Elliot Miles declared. "As per regulations, given the shares Mrs. Jenkins holds, the outcome is already clear. Mr. Wexler, your contract with Cresswell Holdings will be terminated, effective immediately. Security has been notified." Just as Elliot said, a few seconds later, 2 uniformed security officers entered the boardroom. They said nothing, just stood formally near the door, waiting. Wexler looked around the room, searching for a glimmer of hope, some resistance from those he had considered loyal. But there was nothing. His power, built on fear and personal gain, had vanished like a soap bubble in the face of truth and rightful ownership. You can't do this to me," Wexler yelled, his voice breaking with anger and despair. "We didn't do anything, Mr. Wexler," Denise said, her voice still terrifyingly calm. "You did this to yourself, to this company, to Roland Jenkins's legacy." Wexler snatched his phone and a few files from the table, his face contorted with resentment. He stormed out of the boardroom, followed by Meredith Chandler, who suddenly remembered she had another urgent meeting. Curtis Banning slumped into his chair, his head in his hands. When only Denise, Elliot Miles, and the other board members remained, a heavy silence filled the room. No one knew what to say. They were still too shocked by what had just happened. A cleaner, someone they had routinely ignored, was the one holding the destiny of an entire corporation. Finally, Jonas Evers, a young board member who had joined about 2 years ago and was known for his reformist ideas, spoke up hesitantly. Mrs. Jenkins, so, what do we do next?" Denise looked at him, a rare, faint smile touching her lips. "First," she said, "let's start by listening to those who have been ignored for too long." She closed the file in front of her. "The change begins today. We will rebuild Cresswell Holdings, not with empty promises or doctored financial reports, but with respect, fairness, and transparency." She looked around the room, her gaze resting on each person. "I am not here to play the part of an autocrat. I am here to restore what this place once stood for. And I need the help of all of you who genuinely care about the future of this company, and more importantly, about the people who work here." News of CEO Thomas Wexler's dismissal and the appearance of the secret owner Denise Jenkins spread through Cresswell Holdings like wildfire. Whispers, curious glances, bewilderment mixed with a hint of hope began to seep into every office, every hallway. For many, it was an unbelievable shock. For a few others, people like Cynthia or Alonzo, it might have been a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. Denise Jenkins knew the road ahead would not be easy. Firing a corrupt CEO was just the beginning. Taking out the trash doesn't mean the house is clean, she thought to herself. The real work, rebuilding a rotten culture, healing wounds, and restoring trust, had only just begun. But after 15 years of waiting and preparing, she was ready. The following Monday morning, Denise Jenkins parked in the executive section for the first time. She didn't like it, not because of the space. It was wider, closer, covered from the rain, but something about that area made her feel disconnected, as if it were reserved for people who didn't know the smell of sweat. Still, she parked, walked into the building, head held high. She greeted Tasha, the receptionist, by name. "Good morning, Tasha." The young woman blinked, a little surprised, then smiled. "Good morning, Mrs. Jenkins." "Please call me Denise," she replied, then stepped into the elevator. No more mop, no more cleaning cart, just a notebook and a packed schedule. By 9:30 a.m., she was in Wexler's old office. The walls had been repainted to her liking, a calming shade of blue. The view of the city from the large window was the same, the one Wexler used to boast about. But she didn't spend much time looking out. There was too much work to do inside. The first thing she did was call an all-hands meeting, not for the board, not for the executives, but for all employees, from the drivers, administrative staff, the cleaning crew, to customer service representatives. Everyone was invited. The large conference room quickly filled up. People looked confused, some skeptical. No one knew what to expect. Denise walked in, stood at the front. No microphone, just her voice. "I want to start by saying thank you," she said, her voice clear and sincere. "Most of you never knew who I was, and you didn't need to, because your work has spoken more volumes than any title in this building." She paused, her warm gaze sweeping across the room. "I'm here to change things, but not alone. I've spent years listening to your frustrations, your fears, and your ideas, silently. Now, I want to hear them openly." A murmur went through the crowd. People shifted in their seats. This wasn't what they expected from a new boss who had just staged a spectacular takeover. A driver named Alonzo, who had been with the company for nearly 10 years, timidly raised his hand. "Ma'am, Denise, does this mean we'll get our overtime pay back?" "Yes, Alonzo," Denise replied. "And back pay for the last 2 quarters. You'll see it in this Friday's paycheck." A woman from HR, Deborah, stood up. "What about health insurance? It gets worse every year." "We've already started looking at new providers, Deborah," Denise said. "And every employee will receive a survey to provide input. No more backroom decisions about your benefits." There was no applause, no dramatic reactions, just silence. And then whispers started, people turning to each other, as if they were slowly realizing she was serious. Another voice from the back of the room. "What about the people Wexler fired without cause?" "We are reviewing those dismissals," she answered. "If you were wrongfully terminated, we will be in touch. No guarantees, but at the very least, your names will be cleared." Someone else asked, their voice still tinged with disbelief. "Are you really the owner?" Denise smiled. "Always have been." She ended the meeting with a single weighty promise. "If you speak up, I will listen. And if you work, you will be respected." After that, things didn't get easier. They got harder. The remaining executives didn't exactly welcome her with open arms. A few tried to obstruct her decisions, claiming she lacked a business background. One even questioned if she knew how to scale growth. Denise looked him straight in the eye and said, "I scaled my pain into silence for 15 years. I think I can manage your spreadsheet." That shut him up. She brought in new department heads, promoting from within the company, people who had been overlooked for years. She changed supplier contracts, renegotiated warehouse leases, and brought back the annual Employee Appreciation Day that had been mysteriously cut from the budget years ago. She visited each department, sat with them, ate lunch in the break room, listened. And slowly, the building began to feel different. Not softer, but more real. One evening, Cynthia, the cleaner who had cried over her son's accident, left a note in Denise's office. It read, "I never thought someone like us could reach a position like that. You proved me wrong." Denise kept that note in her top drawer. But even after all those changes, one question kept being whispered, and Denise knew she would have to answer it. Why did she wait so long? The question, "Why did you wait so long?" echoed repeatedly during the first weeks Denise Jenkins officially ran Cresswell Holdings. Some asked with genuine curiosity, others with a hint of skepticism, a few with quiet resentment, as if she had let them suffer for too long. But Denise never seemed annoyed or defensive. She would often sit, interlace her fingers, and answer with astonishing composure. Because power only truly has meaning when you know how to use it at the right time and in the right way, she would often say. "I didn't wait out of fear. I waited because this company needed to reveal its true nature without my intervention. I needed to witness it firsthand, to let the rot rise to the surface on its own. If I had acted too soon, they would have said I was overreacting. They would have tried to cover it up, to gloss things over, to say I was making a big deal out of nothing. But 15 years of silent observation, 15 years of gathering evidence that made the truth undeniable. I saw everything. I let their play unfold. And when the time was right, I didn't need to argue. I simply showed them the truth. and they crumbled under the weight of their own wrong decisions. The cleaner became the witness, and finally, the judge. That explanation, though it didn't satisfy everyone immediately, gradually sank into their consciousness. They began to understand the extraordinary patience and strategic vision of this woman. Under Denise's leadership, Cresswell Holdings didn't just change its senior staff. A true breath of fresh air swept through every corner of the company. Meetings were no longer places for showing off or infighting, but for frank discussion and problem solving. Important decisions were no longer made behind closed doors, but always with input from those directly affected. The Voice Inside program she initiated truly took effect. Creative ideas from employees in the most modest positions began to be heard and implemented, leading to unexpected improvements in work efficiency and customer satisfaction. Alonzo, the driver who had once spoken up timidly, was now an active member of the Transport Process Improvement Council. Deborah from HR, along with an elected group of employees, was directly involved in selecting new benefit packages, ensuring the best interests of everyone. One afternoon, Denise walked down the hallway where Thomas Wexler had once pointed to a non-existent stain on the floor. Same carpet, same lighting. But now it was spotless, and no one dared speak to her with a condescending tone anymore. A young intern passed by, gave a slight bow, and said respectfully, "Good afternoon, Mrs. Jenkins." She smiled. "Please call me Denise." That afternoon, she organized a small get-together for all employees in the company courtyard. No formal speeches, no banners, just food trucks, folding chairs, and the happy sound of laughter returning. Alonzo, the driver, clinked his soda can against hers. "To the silent ones," he said. Denise raised her can. "To the ones they never saw coming." Denise Jenkins' story is not just about reclaiming ownership of a company. It's a profound lesson in how we perceive human worth and the power of perseverance. Never judge others by the uniform they wear or the job they do. Talent, intelligence, and dignity can be hidden in the most unexpected places. Invisibility does not mean lack of value. Listening is a superpower. In a noisy world, the ability to quietly observe and listen can provide profound insights and an unexpected advantage. Denise turned her invisibility into a tool for gathering truth. Patience and timing are key. Acting at the right moment is more important than acting hastily. Waiting for the opportune moment, when the truth is strong enough to speak for itself, can yield extraordinary results. True power lies not in titles or money, but in the respect and trust you build. Denise reclaimed her company, not just with shares, but with truth and the desire to build a better working environment. Real change starts with changing the culture and how people are treated. A good leader cares not only about profits, but also about creating an environment where people feel respected, heard, and have opportunities to grow. Everyone has an inner voice worth listening to. When we create conditions for those voices to be heard, we can discover limitless potential and build a stronger collective. The lesson isn't just about her ownership. It's about how easily we judge people by their uniforms, how quickly we talk over someone holding a mop, how readily we assume value is tied to a corner office title. Denise wasn't the exception. She was the reminder. People don't become invisible just because you stop looking at them. And sometimes the person sweeping the floor is the one who built the house. So if you work with someone you've never really spoken to, maybe stop and say hello. You never know who holds the keys to the entire building. If this story made you pause for even a second, share it. Because somewhere right now, there's another Miss Denise being overlooked, dismissed, erased, and maybe, just maybe, she's watching. Let her know we see her.